Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Tickets Please. I'm your host, Josiah Wampfler. On this episode, it's part 2 of my coverage of the 2026 Wisconsin Film Festival. First, I'll share a couple of my favorite films from the fest, Blue Heron and My Father's Shadow. Then I sat down with Phipps and Jason Fuhrman, two avid cinephiles and writers from Madison, as they discuss the most interesting films they saw at the festival. All that is ahead on this episode of Two Tickets Please. Blue Heron is a film I've been thinking about for weeks since I saw it. Audacious doesn't even begin to describe this debut feature from director Sophy Romvari. But that is not what I thought I'd be saying 30 minutes into the film. It's not that I wasn't enjoying it. In fact, I thought it was a quite excellent coming-of-age family drama. It's just that it felt like a story I'd seen told many times before. That is, until about halfway through the film, when Romvari does something that completely changes what the movie is. Set in the sun-soaked summer on Vancouver Island sometime during the 1990s, Romvari does an excellent job immersing her audience in the childhood memories of Sasha, the youngest daughter of a Hungarian-Canadian family struggling to settle in. While Sasha and her siblings seem to be having an idyllic summer together at times, this is a family deep in crisis. Her parents, her siblings, and the social workers that visit don't know what to do about her oldest brother, Jeremy, who is acting out in various, sometimes dangerous ways. At times, Sasha experiences a wonderfully calm and contented brother, watching TV with all of his siblings. At others, he is punching his fist through a window or being brought home by the police. While the story is not unique, Romvari's filmmaking decisions are, as she makes sure to steer clear of the seductive nature of nostalgia. Through her images and the film's immersive sound design, she fully transports her audience to this time and place, but nothing feels idealized. It's like we are looking at all of these events from afar, because we are. The camera itself far away from its subjects, long lenses allowing us to peer into these memories from a distance. And from that vantage point, we are able to sense the foreboding feeling underlying everything. Jeremy's behavior has become normalized for this family, but they are at their wits' end. Something has to give. And then just when the tension feels to be coming to a head, Romvari introduces an audacious metatextual element to the narrative that cracks open this story into something far more unique, far more thought-provoking, and ultimately, far more emotional. I won't spoil exactly what happens, but suffice to say, my jaw was on the floor by the end of the film. With beautiful cinematography, stunning performances from her cast, and perfectly paced and precise editing, Blue Heron shows that Romvari is clearly a filmmaker whose career will be one to watch. I'm giving Blue Heron 4.5 out of 5 stars. The film is currently out in limited release. Another stunning directorial debut that captures the feeling of memory, My Father's Shadow had me hooked within seconds with its opening frames. You rarely see a director come out of the gates with such a unique and fully formed style, but Akinola Davies Jr. has done just that with this film, which draws heavily on his own childhood growing up in Nigeria. Set in 1993, the film follows a father and his 2 sons as they travel to the city of Lagos to retrieve money that he is owed. Folarin, played brilliantly by Sope Dirisu, sees his sons Remy and Akin far too little, and the trip starts as a wonderful opportunity for them to spend time together. You can feel the possibilities, perhaps even hope in the air, as the trio enters the city bustling with culture. But you can also feel an underlying tension. The people of Nigeria are waiting the recent election results, and though many believe change is in the air, there is a fear the current government will not give up control. Ultimately, as we know from history, they do not. And Folarin and his sons are caught in the chaos of a country coming undone at its seams. There is perhaps no greater medium than cinema to capture the essence of memory and time, and this is at the core of Davies' vision for My Father's Shadow. Throughout the film, he will often cut to flashes of different scenes, seemingly outside the present timeline. It is as if his characters are seeing visions of their past, or even their future. Certain moments seem to repeat, but in a slightly different manner than before. There is even one scene that ends abruptly, as we see the last bit of film roll past the projector and lights start to leak in. And then toward the end of the film, we see visions of an alternate timeline, perhaps a version of events our characters would have liked to see, before having to face the cold, hard truth of reality. All of this firmly places us within Aiken's perspective, the eldest son, seeing all of these events through his memory, flawed, elastic, and beautifully subjective. Shot on 16mm film, the cinematography of My Father's Shadow is truly special. Outside the inherent beauty of the format, what is even more incredible is where Davies and his cinematographer Jermaine Canute-Edwards choose to point their camera, how they fill up their frames. When they enter Lagos, the cinematography creates a real sense of place that instantly reminded me of how director Payal Kapadia portrayed Mumbai in All We Imagine Is Light. While many filmmakers focus on big wide shots of cityscapes to establish a setting, Davies and Edwards' camera immediately goes to the city's people, their faces, and the experiences those faces carry. That is also where their camera likes to linger when it comes to Sope Dirisu, who is absolutely jaw-dropping as Falarin. His handsome but weathered face tells us of the difficult life he has lived without him having to say a word. And when the film chooses to have him finally open up his heart to his son on the beaches of Lagos, Dirisu excels, creating a scene nearly as powerful as the beach scene in Moonlight. My Father's Shadow is an incredible announcement of Akinola Davies Jr.'s career as a filmmaker, and one that will surely benefit from additional viewings. I'm giving My Father's Shadow 4.5 out of 5 stars. The film is currently available to stream on Mubi.
Meet me tonight in dreamland under the silvery moon.
So the next film I wanted to talk about was really quite a pleasant surprise for me. It's called Late Fame, directed by Kent Jones. This is another first-time feature. I think Kent Jones is mostly known as a film critic and a curator in New York, and he's actually one of my favorite film critics. I feel like I have read a lot of his reviews, and I appreciate his perspective, so I was pleasantly surprised to see that he had directed a feature film and stars one of my favorite actors, Willem Dafoe, who is, as you may know, is an Appleton, Wisconsin native, so then there's a Wisconsin connection. And he's just one of those actors where I will literally watch any movie that he's in because I just always enjoy him, and he's great. So in this film, he stars as a forgotten poet in New York who published one book of poetry decades ago, and now he works as a post office factotum, and is not really, just kind of living an ordinary life, in New York. And he's out of the blue just suddenly rediscovered by a group of eccentric young artists who are kind of, I guess they're young, they're affluent, and I guess you could describe them as maybe pretentious pseudo-intellectuals, and they're
I thought you were going to say a cult for a second.
No, not exactly a cult, but so there were two things that drew me to this film. First of all, Willem Dafoe, of course, and also the fact that it's an adaptation of a recently discovered and previously unpublished novella by the Austrian author and playwright Arthur Schnitzler. And so this book was completed in 1895, and Arthur Schnitzler also wrote the book Traumnovelle, or Dream Story, which was published in 1926, and that was the basis for Stanley Kubrick's final film, the psychosexual odyssey Eyes Wide Shut, which is one of my personal favorite films. So, of course, everything just had all the keywords. I'm like, okay, you got Arthur Schnitzler, you got Willem Dafoe, and so this is also, it's just like Eyes Wide Shut. It's transplanted from turn of the century Vienna to contemporary New York. So I was very curious to see how this compared, and how they updated the material, and I was really impressed with how, and same with Eyes Wide Shut, how something that was written such a long time ago and in a totally different milieu could just feel so relevant and just could just resonate so much. Because I haven't read the original novel because it was actually literally just found recently and translated. It was found among the author's papers somewhere. So. And I think the original book is kind of like a satire of the literati, and so this film, it's a drama, but it's also definitely a black comedy, and it's kind of like a satire of, and it's about the emptiness of literary fame, and it's. I found it to be hilarious, and the dialogue was just scintillating, and the performances were magnetic, and just one of those movies where I just loved everything about it from start to finish. Just kind of like, especially for a debut feature, it was just very, very well written, well acted. It just, it's a film that's like it's about something, and it just fully commits to its themes, and. I think there's a part in the movie that I think, just as an example of some of the humor, because like this group of, so Willem Dafoe plays a character who is, a very working class, and, kind of past his, hasn't written poetry in decades, and is just kind of living his life. And then it's like this group of young, affluent, kind of pretentious pseudo-intellectuals who have this club, and they're artists and essayists. And then I should mention Greta Lee also stars opposite Willem Dafoe as a vampish theater actress. And the way that the story is updated for like the social media age too, and it just really brought in a lot of themes that are relevant to today, and just kind of about fame and authenticity and art and kind of faded glory, and and Willem Dafoe kind of gets drawn into this circle, and it's like he's almost starting a new chapter in his life and sort of rediscovering his talent, but then he doesn't really know if it's like what's really going on, or what why they just suddenly just discovered him out of the blue. And there's like one scene where Willem Dafoe goes to the loft of like the leader of this group, and he just lives in this just like luxury apartment because he's basically affluent, and his hasn't really ever had to worry about anything in life, and is just kind of living out this bohemian artist fantasy. And he goes to his loft and sits down, and there's like a $1,200 first edition of Naked Lunch by William Burroughs, and there's just all those little details that just really just such a vivid film that just felt very incisive. And I laughed a lot, but it's also kind of sad, and just it was just one of those films that I just found to be extremely satisfying. And I had seen it right after. Sometimes in the festival too, I feel like the timing of when you see a film really has a lot to do, especially when you're seeing as many films as I am. It's like sometimes where you see a film compared to what else you've seen really makes a difference. And I had just seen a particularly heavy, kind of bleak Hungarian film right before that. So then following it up with this was just like exactly what I needed. And yeah, it was just really fun. And I saw it with a bunch of people. We had a great conversation afterward. I feel like it's a film with the talent and with the stars. Like I would imagine it would play in theaters. It's not exactly like an obscure film that you can't see anywhere, but I would definitely like to see it again, and I'd recommend it. But I haven't heard anything about a wide release yet.
The other film I wanted to highlight was also on that Sunday, the 12th. It was at the Chesa Museum, the world premiere screening of And Then I Knew 'Twas Wind. It was the lone feature that won the Golden Badger Award of the three. And I really enjoyed juror Sarah Badke's write-up on it. She's also a former Tone Madison contributor. And so I figured, based on those endorsements, it would be worth prioritizing the screening during the fest. It checked a lot of boxes. I mean, it was kind of like short summer, not slow summer. Short summer, which is part of like slow cinema, quote unquote. This was also kind of in that vein. And there was also a direct allusion to Picnic at Hanging Rock, which is, I don't know if it's one of my favorite films of all time, but it's certainly up there. Maybe Jason would also agree with that.
Yeah.
And yeah, since this was the world premiere, it just had kind of like an energy that was hard to contain and describe. I mean, it was a completely packed crowd in the Chazen Auditorium, which I think is the smallest theater that the festival uses. They probably could have nearly filled like the marquee for that.
Yeah.
talking about the film, which is written and directed by Darius McKenzie, a UW graduate, who's also on the tennis team for a time. I think he's originally from California, but he went to school here. So that's the Wisconsin connection. But the film itself is quite minimalistic. It's just about this young couple who goes canoeing in this rural area of Oregon. I think it's like the fossil beds. It feels like Mackenzie and maybe some of his collaborators did a lot of careful geological research for the film, but it's not just like thrown in your face. It's kind of on the periphery, on the edges of the film, which is really fascinating and kind of like a bold choice to do that as your first feature. But of course, that approach prompted a lot of questions from the audience when it was over. It was just like story question after story question after story question. But like people were really engaged with the film, which it didn't surprise me, but I was just like, it's not like a more mainstream presentation of a story. It's kind of going through different time periods. I would say it's like a temporal mystery. I guess that's how I characterized it. But yeah, talking too much about it sort of ruins the film, so I don't really want to do that. But I do want to talk about like the Q&A, the substance of the Q&A a little bit, which I touched upon at the top. Mackenzie was talking about his influences, and he mentioned the Gus Van Sant surreal drama Gary or Jerry. That's from 2002, starring Matt Damon and Casey Affleck. He mentioned it as a visual reference point. That's a film that like nobody talks about. I think I watched it like a decade ago, kind of randomly, as more like kind of an underrated movie. And it's definitely, there's kind of nothing like it, and it's kind of one of those films that someone would say, oh, you either love it or hate it. There's no middle ground with that. So that intrigued me. I also thought about Terrence Malick's work, which is maybe like a cliche thing to say, but The Tree of Life seemed like somewhat of an inspiration for this film. But like the cinematography too, like the landscape cinematography reminded me a little bit of that. His DP is Chase Pottinger. And he talked about how they worked together to create some of the like most striking night cinematography. Like that was the goal. And that also reminded me of just watching Train Dreams quite recently, which also has some really beautiful night scenes that are naturally lit or have the illusion of being naturally lit. Also a film that takes place in the Pacific Northwest. So, during the Q&A, I was trying to come up with a question for him that was not story related. So I asked him kind of about the color grading of the film because it looked very interesting. At the beginning of the Q&A, he talked about making a DCP for it, a digital cinema package for it, and kind of messing something up in the compression. He said that the blacks didn't quite look right when he was watching it with the audience, which is interesting. So, I'd absolutely watch the film again, but I'm curious just to know how it's supposed to look, I guess. Yeah. Some of the shots of landscapes in there reminded me of like old textbook illustrations, which is like a really unique quality that I would not like. It's not, that's not like a put down or anything at all. It kind of lends a certain air to the film and an intrigue for me. But yeah, I had like a half-formed question that he was like, are you talking about the compositions themselves or the colors? And I was like, well, kind of both, I guess. The title of the film. So everybody asks all these story questions, but nobody asks about how did he arrive at this title. And I found out that it's a reference to this very mystical sounding composition from the 1990s by Toru Takemitsu. It's like a really beautiful 13-minute piece that I just kind of listened to for the first time a couple days ago. But that would have been a great question to ask him about his relationship to that piece of music and how it kind of inspired, I guess, maybe the genesis or early stages of writing the film. That's pretty much it on that. It's just not a film that you can really see right now. I think he's touring other festivals with it. He mentioned submitting it to some other festivals and still awaiting word on if it's been accepted. But I hope that the film returns in some capacity to Madison or It just has, it's picked up by a distributor and put out on physical media.
Yeah, so the other film I wanted to talk about that really struck me was called Orphan by the Hungarian filmmaker Lazlo Nemes. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but this is his first feature in 7 years, actually, and he's probably most famous for a film from 2015, which I believe was nominated for an Academy Award. It's a shattering Holocaust drama called Son of Saul, which I saw at Sundance when it came out, and that's definitely one of the most unforgettable films I've ever seen. So I figured this was going to be pretty intense, but also like starkly beautiful. And I guess it's an ultra-realistic coming-of-age fable set in the aftermath of the brutally suppressed Hungarian uprising of 1956. And apparently it draws on a story from his own family history, and he's spent 2 years writing the screenplay. And it's so this is actually the film I saw right before late fame on that day, and it follows a 12-year-old boy named Andor whose fragile sense of identity begins to fracture when a stranger appears claiming to be his long-lost father. And this is one of those films that is it's very beautifully shot, very meticulously composed, and definitely an art film, but it's also has a very elliptical narrative. I mean, there's not really any like expository dialogue. It's like you kind of again, you're sort of just getting little like fleeting impressions of reality, and you're sort of piecing together, and you kind of get this like even it's not a very graphic film. There's not really a lot of there's nothing particularly violent that happened, but it's like the violence is sort of on the edges. And there are again, it's kind of like in Short Summer where the film is so like poetic and kind of contemplative, and then when the violence does happen, it's all the more jarring and effective for the contrast. And then it feels very visceral, but not gratuitous. It's like very effective, like showing like the reality of violence and within the context of this world. It's just one of those films that's kind of slow, but it really, and then it's like as you learn more and more, it just kind of gradually, the reality of the situation sort of gradually dawns on you, and I found it to be extremely powerful, just like Son of Saul was. I knew it was probably going to be like a really intense and like emotionally draining film, but also like very powerful, and the kind of film that really sticks with. Like I haven't been able to stop thinking about it, and just like the images. And again, it's a film. It's very stark. It's very beautiful, but very minimalist. I mean, there's like no, as far as I remember, there's no like score. Nothing is sentimentalized. It's just like very stark reality, and very the only music in the film is diegetic music, and there's not much of that either. So it's just you're just kind of like thrown into this world, but it's almost like, even though it's very has a very high artistic quality, but at times it almost feels like you're watching a documentary because it's just so vivid and just very detailed. It was a heavy film, but it really made an impression on me. So I think following that up with Late Fame was just kind of a perfect like kind of transition, because I was like, okay, I need something a little bit lighter, still dark, but just kind of a little bit more fun, for lack of a better word. I think, just a very, very haunting film, very brutally honest, and also knowing that it's based on not only real historical events, but then the director, felt very deeply personal and very authentic. And it definitely encouraged me to learn more about the history of Hungary, and particularly the uprising and life under Soviet repression. And it felt very timely, of course, in this year especially. It felt like the films were, there's never like an overarching theme, but you definitely see like threads and like patterns, and it felt like it definitely fit in with a lot of the other very like timely and relevant selections in the festival. So it was definitely one of the highlights for me.
Yeah, it seems like kind of a nice complement, or maybe even could be a double feature with Short Summer, to some of the qualities of the film you're describing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and then also kind of seeing the war or the aftermath of war and brutality through the perspective of a child, and sort of just a child just trying to live their life, and then also the relationship with this stranger, and kind of dealing with like family drama against the backdrop of this broader social unrest and repression.
Well, I think last year we did the 2 highlights in one film that was a disappointment, or just this year I didn't have anything that really disappointed me. But the more I thought about it, the more I was confused by Maddie's Secret, which is a film that I think we both saw because I met you outside. So yeah, while I was watching it, I would say I enjoyed it. It was fine, but then I was like pondering it more, not even in relation to other things I was watching. But yeah, I'll get into that. But I do want to start with something more laudatory that was written about this, just as a letterboxd review by a user who's just named Brian, but who sometimes uses the handle of She-Hogue, I believe. Quote, "Many films struggle to conjure this very particular tone, and actor and director John Early just totally nails it. I think it's because he and his actors simply refuse to admit any distinction between comedy and melodrama, rather than get caught up in the binaristic irony, sincerity, push and pull so much modern comedy and camp succumbs to." I think that's my problem with the movie, is that I don't really understand who this movie is for. It's not extreme enough to work as like a satire. It's just like playing it straight. And I think that its lightness and skittishness feels sort of half committed. Like we're seeing an idea that's still being brainstormed as it's being filmed for the screen or something. I would like to talk more thoroughly with someone who had a joyous response to the movie, but I mean, like I said, I didn't dislike watching it. I was just somewhat confused by it. Like, it does have a lot of playful moments, but I feel like those are very contained to the scenes that they're in. It's kind of like a riff on, I think I've heard John Early talk about it being kind of like a riff on like a Lifetime made-for-TV movie, something like that. Yeah, but as it goes on, there's also like maybe a nod to like films like Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, that kind of quality, which, I mean, Cuckoo's Nest is definitely a drama, but it has some comedic elements. And it's kind of like a mix of that in here as well. You know, I was drawn to the film because it had like a very sizable cast of character actors and comedians, including Early, who plays the titular character of Maddie in drag for the entire film, and without any like postmodern winking at the camera, as far as I'm aware, as far as I'm remembering. Kate Berlant, who's a comedian, she probably gives the most striking performance in the film as Maddie's friend Dina, who's, I would struggle to describe who she's trying to be, but maybe that's kind of the joke. And then Claudia O'Doherty, who I know from the Netflix series Love, I believe. She's quite good in that, quite charming in that, and she's pretty good in this too. She plays like Maddie's vlogging, recipe foodie rival, Emily Brown, though I don't think she gets quite enough screen time to really show her, I called it acerbic comic chops. Yeah. You know, I don't want to get too far into like the plot of it. There's some fun elements to it. The foodie vlog recipe company, Gourmaybe, I think it's a great name. Maybe it's not even emphasized enough in the film. But there's a point in the film, maybe at the beginning of the second act, where this character of Heron is introduced. Well, I guess I should also back up and say that one of the things that stuck out to me was kind of called to my attention by someone else who I watched it with, and she mentioned that, you know, this film is about bulimia and an eating disorder, but it's not mentioned at all in the write-up of the film. Whether like the general plot synopsis that you can find on like IMDb or the film guide for the Wisconsin Film Festival. And well, the film is called Maddie's Secret, so maybe giving that away is giving away the plot, but this is a comedy, and the way it's presented is...
I mean, famously, eating disorders are something you'd want a...
trigger warning for. So that was her taking issue with that. And I would agree that I would just mention that because the plot of a comedy is not necessarily the reason you're going to it. You're going to it for the people in it who are going to give you some sort of absurd scenario to chuckle at.
Well, I think also not mentioning it too kind of primes you to think that The Secret is going to be something to do with the fact that John Early is in drag the entire
Oh, sure, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Which I think that's like an interesting aspect to the film, that it's not about like a trans character or something. It's just this actor is just playing a woman, which is an interesting concept, but by not mentioning what...
Well, yeah, I mean,
bulimia part
if this film came out in the late 90s or something, it would have a different contextual meaning, or would be interpreted differently than it would be today. I mean, the film isn't officially out there yet, so I'm curious to know what other criticism will be once it's more widely released. But sorry, anyway, those are almost like tangential or just supplementary to what I wanted to say about the plot. There's this character who comes into the film very briefly. I think her name is Heron, and she talks about Maddie being a healthy weight. But the film doesn't really do anything with this. It's almost just like, here's a story beat or something that is triggering Maddie to indulge in destructive behavior again. I guess the final thoughts on that is, just the idea of playing a movie like this straight and not defining things as like a full-on satire or anything. I'm not sure if John Waters was mentioned in the description for the film in the guide, but yeah, maybe I wanted the film to be more like that, or I think it would work better if it were more grotesque, absurd, something. I mean, that's what the final cut of this is, just kind of playing it safe or just playing it straight in a film that I would also consider queer, which is maybe kind of funny in itself. But in the end, the film is just kind of okay. But certainly a film I would like to talk more about off camera. But I don't know if it's something I'd ever rewatch it, but it's kind of ripe for conversation.